Let's talk tuna, more specifically Atlantic bluefin tuna. What makes these tuna unique are their impressive sizes and being warm-blooded, and this makes them admirable to artisan fishermen. Sadly, they're a little too admirable to fishermen and now are in danger of becoming extinct in the next few years. While this fact is not unavailable to the public, there is a distinct apathy toward these tuna as they aren't particularly cute and they taste quite good. The question racing through ecologists' minds is exactly what can be done to bring Atlantic bluefin tuna to a sustainable level. To answer this question, we first need to understand what is happening in the first place. Well, long story short, their ecosystem has become compromised, but that doesn't really help us. The longer story short involves years of overfishing, people being greedy, and our little friend methylmercury. Fishing today is ridiculous with massive sea nets, mile-long fishing lines, and fish aggregating devices, also known as fads. The largest fishing vessels in all of the Atlantic have enough cargo space to hold half of the tuna remaining in the entire Atlantic Ocean. With fishing vessels being as large as they are and plenty of methods to fill their cargo, the only thing stopping fishermen from fishing all of the tuna is the fact that if they took all the tuna out of the ocean, there'd be none left, therefore putting them out of a job. This should be incentive enough, but here's where the major problem starts. The time it would take to gain a profit from leaving the fish alone would just have such a smaller impact on the fisheries than if they were to say, take them all and put them in a giant freezer. The worst year thus far was back in 2009 when the quota for these tuna was about 15,000 metric tons. About 66,000 metric tons were actually caught, which is about 1/3 of all tuna at the time. That's not fishing, that's genocide. The people who are most responsible for this greedy behavior are the Japanese, who buy most of the bluefin tuna, sometimes for millions of dollars. The reason why they support the practice of killing off all the tuna is so that one day they'll have a monopoly on all the tuna and make oodles of cash money. When it comes to preventing greedy individuals from ruining things for everyone else, you'd think that the governments of the Atlantic would do something. Well, they are, sort of. Over 30 nations have joined together in an organization known as the International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tuna, or ICAT for short. Now, this organization would help out a lot if it weren't only a punchline away from a joke. While some nations like the United States are good at following the recommended guidelines for fishing, a lot of nations which belong to ICAT fail to produce accurate reports of what they've caught. It has been found that at least 30% of all bluefin tuna on the market right now are being caught illegally. This statistic does not even bring into account those outside of the fisheries who catch tuna. Well, one might wonder, if tuna are in so much danger, why aren't they just protected under the Endangered Species Act? Well, the problem is, we really don't know how many tuna there actually are. Don't get me wrong, we have an idea, and it's less than what would be sustainable under today's circumstances. The only semi-direct population check for bluefin tuna was done about 2010 under the World Ocean Census. The number received by that census was able to put the bluefin tuna on the vulnerable species list, but not quite the endangered species list. With a direct population taken, we could use a population determining equation such as the one used by fisheries if it wasn't for these two stupid variables. These two variables account for the immigration and emigration rates of fish, and seeing as how tuna travel between 1,000 to 3,000 miles a year, often passing through areas occupied by other populations of tuna, it renders the whole process kind of hard to determine whether or not something is immigrating or emigrating. To make a bad situation absolutely horrible, the water that the tuna live in is less than desirable. Floating around with all the little tiny phytoplankton is a highly dangerous chemical known as methylmercury. While the water itself is far from toxic, this type of mercury has a nasty habit of bioaccumulating. Once it gets into the tuna, there is very little way of it getting out. The main source for all this mercury is the smoking smokestacks, which release all of the chemicals in coal that are useless after combustion. Unfortunately, all these useless chemicals tend to find their way into the ocean, seeing as how Earth's surface has no shortage of water. Every time tuna intake any water, the methylmercury gets stuck in their blood and travels around their body. This is bad, as some figures put concentrations inside tuna to be about 1,000 times higher than the surrounding water. The tuna are not only suffering and unhealthy, but they can actually be hazardous to us humans who enjoy consuming them. While some of you might still be shrugging your shoulders, there are long-term effects which are kind of overwhelming. Let's touch on biomass, the organic matter that can be used as fuel in an ecosystem. Here we have a diagram containing producers, represented by phytoplankton, primary consumers, represented by sea jellies, secondary consumers, represented by small fish, and tertiary consumers, represented by tuna. As tuna die out, there is extra organic matter in the ecosystem, so other levels adjust accordingly. Soon enough, humans really want something to replace their tuna and hunt small fish to extinction. The other groups adjust accordingly. Now, as much as people love a good peanut butter and jelly sandwich, a peanut butter and jellyfish sandwich sounds nowhere as good. Now we have biomass trapped into areas we cannot consume, but on top of missing out on fishy foods, we also begin to see the oceans are a lot less pretty. Algae levels will increase, as well as the levels of sea jellies, sea stars, and other uneatable creatures, thus making oceans more like this instead of this. You know those lovely beaches on Cape Cod? Well, now imagine instead of swimming through those waters, you're now swimming through slimy sea jellies. Not only does this reduce our beaches and oceans into cesspools of stinking goo, but can lead to more global issues. Sea jellies help to trap nitrogen into the surface of waters, thus preventing vital organisms such as phytoplankton from being able to live. Without phytoplankton, we lose all about 80% of our world's ability to convert CO2 into oxygen, and now we have this snowballing effect. Tuna are not key to our oceans, but they model what is happening right now to our oceans. It is easier for us to stop now and prevent further damage and prevent ourselves from destroying the planet that is in fact our only home. Now that we have identified the entirety of the problem, let's see what solutions are already underway. Over the past few years, a few colleges and science departments have been working in an extensive tagging program to solve the mess made by. What they were looking for was information not only concerning where the tuna went, but also they wanted to check to see the growth of the tuna in order to determine other factors on their population, such as birth and death rate. From what they've found thus far, the main part of the tuna fish population is found in the juvenile index, and the adult index is actually shrinking. Tuna are indeed in trouble, as with more juveniles and less adults, the population that can actually breed is less. Since only adult tuna can legally be fished, and since the hunting is based off of the total population, this will create a scenario where tuna populations will not grow with no breeding population. This causes problems for tuna and problems for us humans who love our tuna fish sandwiches. Along with the tagging programs, more international solutions are already coming forward. Surprisingly, a lot of the solutions that need to be put into practice are now actually happening around us. Japan has limited its tuna intake, saying that it will no longer support the complete destruction of the fish, and they also refuse to buy from those outside of the fisheries. ICCAT has limited the amount of fishing that can take place in the Atlantic with backing more powerful nations such as the United States and Canada. Finally, the dynamic equation of tuna is now understood enough to finally mark them as endangered as of March of 2013. Now, while this could be marked as score 1 for Team Tuna, the battle is far from over. In the 1970s, the decade when scientists realized that we cannot continue our mass industrialization without consequence, the bluefin tuna were in danger of becoming extinct from overfishing and other international pressures. Greenpeace helped lead limits to be set up in every nation so that way they were never overfished again, until the 1990s rolled around and the bluefin tuna were put back down to the levels of 1970. The next step would be to increase the power of ICCAT so nothing like this ever happens again, because the problem was with last time there was no one making sure the tuna wouldn't be forgotten about due to other issues in politics. This is just one component of the solution, as methylmercury is still a problem whether there are a few tuna or a lot of tuna. We need to find alternatives for coal not just for the sake of tuna, but also for our atmosphere, which does not like its CO2 blanket wrapped around it. Individually, we can help by removing that tuna fish sandwich that probably contains gross levels of mercury anyways and replacing with lots of other savory options. Don't be too sad. If tuna are allowed to bounce back, then there will be plenty of tuna for another day. Until then, it's about time we march to a different tune. Or in this case, a different tuna.